Welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know, where we like to talk about D&D storylines and information that you can use in your upcoming game that might be centered around Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft that comes out on May 18th. Or it's just really fun to know, fun stuff to get your brain going. I am Greg Tito, and I am joined by Wes Schneider. Hi, Wes.
Hi, Greg.
Very excited to talk through this domain of dread, Tepest. Which I don't know very much about, and I don't know if everyone listening does either. So what's the elevator pitch for Tepest as a domain?
All right. So every one of the domains of dread have some horror genre inspiration to them. So I don't think it's any surprise for like Barovia with Count Strad von Zarovich is very much inspired by gothic horror tropes. Or you might have something like the domain of Blutzfer, which is more like alien horror that has like a cosmic horror twist to it. Tepest, we took this domain in a direction which is deeply inspired by folk horror. So this is, films like The Wicker Man or Midsummer, or stories like that, where the horror is at the fringes of civilization. It's agricultural. It's in the traditions that have been underpinning societies for a long time, or that, civilized, or what we consider normal society is like, this is normal, but then you get beyond the safety of what and no, there's something older, there's something else.
And it kind of plays on, correct me if I'm wrong, does it play on the idea that rural settings are usually portrayed as idyllic, and that like everything's happy here because we just farm the land, and isn't that great? And then it takes that idea and flips it up, be like, no, everything is not okay because they're growing things that are terrible.
Yeah, it's like it's rural, so it's closer to nature, and that's good. And like, not necessarily.
Interesting.
So Tepest as a domain is, the domain itself is pretty wild. You've got high mountains, you've got dense forests, and you've got land that isn't so much that good for growing and survival. And in Tepest is a single village called Victal. And Victal is populated by happy people who are super excited to farm the land and to fish in the lake, and everything's great and nice and good all the time, forever.
And the young people are children of the corn who just love to...
Well, that's one of the interesting things, is like, if you come to visit, you might start to notice that there's not many kids around. And the kids that are around, well, a lot of these people are human or humanish, but all the kids seem to be hex blood, which are one of the new lineages in the book, where there are individuals who have been brought into being through the help of a hag. And that's a little weird. And then so is some of this folksy art and some of these traditions, and particularly a seasonal festival called the Tithing.
Oh, I don't know like where this is going.
And this is where players who end up exploring or coming to Victal will initially find them very welcoming, but they'll start to hear more and more about a regional faith that reveres a deity just called Mother. And Mother is strangely not present necessarily, but close by. She lives in the forest, or she's just over there, but everybody's very concerned about Mother is watching. You have to make sure to please Mother. Mother likes things just so on and so forth.
I'm anticipating all of the ways that this could go.
Well, at that point, just to pull back the curtain a little bit, so the Dark Lord of this domain actually, we'll start a little farther back. In previous editions, the Dark Lords of the Domain was just a group of hags called the Three Hags. For Van Richten's guide, we update the story of the Three Hags a little bit. I don't think it's any secret that many of us who work on fifth edition really enjoy hags. You see them come up quite a bit in our stories. This is one where we wanted to explore, all right, we've seen hags before. What makes a hag a Dark Lord? And in Tepest, rather than saying that this is just ruled, that the domain is ruled by a collection of three hags, we pick out one of them in particular, the hag Lorinda. And she's always been one of the three hags. But the story that we've explored with Lorinda is that, for reasons that I'll let readers find out, she has decided to turn against her other two hag sisters and has imprisoned them within their own cauldron within a moving fortress called the Gurgle that ranges almost like Baba Yaga's hut style through Tepest. But Lorinda is particularly interested in creating her own family and creating her own children, her own offspring, which is something that her sisters didn't want her to do. So now she endlessly works to create her own servants, children, whatever have you, but she doesn't have the power of a full coven, which means that she's limited. So her creations are ill-fated and don't typically survive too terribly long. So she creates these monstrous spawn, but they're not long for this world. But there's one way that she's found to get a little extra longevity out of what she creates about her maid family, and that's to have the people of Tepest essentially make sacrifices to this creature that she creates. Through these sacrifices, through these rituals, she's able to extend the life and the livelihoods of her creations a little longer.
Okay, so that's the tithing then. That's the ceremony that does
and
that.
that's something where the people of the town don't know all of the details. They don't know that Mother is a hag. They don't have all of the details on what's happening with her. So they themselves, and through the manipulations of Lorinda as Mother, and through her disguises, she's manipulated this town and allowed them to create their own mythology that is, oh, the mother protects us. Oh, she brings the fertility to the crops. Oh, she's the reason everything's fine and safe here. All we have to do is once a season have this grand festival, and whoever is like the chosen of the festival, they get to have this, slightly fatal but still honored encounter with the mother and her creation.
What horrific thing is the creation? What is it?
The lovely thing is that's up for the DM to decide. We give you a variety of options because this is a case where we want to make sure that if we said that, and the monster's ultimately a bugbear, a minotaur, whatever, it locks it into a certain CR band. Right. So we wanted to make sure that Lorinda's creations, can be frightening to a group, whether, their first level or, their 20th level. So part of the adventure creation section of this domain is identifying and determining what the creation, what Mother's child here is, creating one that's right for your group.
Oh, that makes sense, so that it can be a just a designed experience that a dungeon master can do, and,
Yeah.
and not even just for the challenge rating portion of it, but something that has effects on the party as a whole would be way more interesting than just a random bugbear.
Absolutely. And since Lorinda is constantly going through this experience again and again and like creating these different monstrosities, it makes perfect sense for sometimes it might be something like this, sometimes it might be some other sort of terror.
Yeah. I mean, I even like this is why it's fun for dungeon masters to come up with this type of thing, right? But I like the idea of it being a cumulative thing, right? So it's you're actually creating a over time, after every year or every season where this occurs, it's just getting more and more monstrous and more larger.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a perfectly cool story for something like this. I sort of like the idea of coming to Tepest, meeting the people of Victal, being like, okay, y'all maybe aren't great to begin with, but you certainly are in a worse situation than you deserve. Experiencing that, leaving and having other adventures, and then coming back and finding like, oh, you're still doing your thing. Ooh, and it's worse now.
Yeah, I should have dealt with this before. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how do the children that you mentioned early on being hexbloods, how does that figure into this?
So there's a description of Victal in detail, as well as the tie that happens there, about just little elements that are off about the town. Like in general, the people of Victal are quite friendly, but they're also friendly under duress. And they're friendly because they would prefer to maybe sacrifice a stranger to the horrible thing at the end of the tithing or the end of the tithe, as opposed to their neighbor or loved ones or whatever have you. So there's a considerable amount of description put into just little things that groups might notice about the village that feel off. Certainly, if anybody has ever seen the movie The Wicker Man, the original The Wicker Man, then that movie is like it does such a good job of just sort of killing the protagonist with kindness. It's like everything's so nice, but also, oh, there's like this creepy maypole dance, and there's this like rural like celebration, and people are missing, and so on and so forth. And everybody in town is like, no, it's fine, it's great. Like,
We love
come
it
have
here.
a beer with us.
Yeah.
Exactly. But some things are definitely off, whether it's in the artistry, whether it's in the music, or whether it's, hey, none of the like all of the kids here definitely have some fey touched angle to them. What's up with that? Hey, let's go have a drink at the pub.
Little did they know that the pub is full of bees.
Everything's bad.
Everything's bad. Well, I find that type of horror, extremely off-putting, as anybody does, even if you've gone to a rural town that is new to you. You start coming up with those types of storylines even without the fantastic nature that's going on here. So it plays on stuff that is part of that is part of the human experience, which I really enjoy.
And while a good deal of the domain focuses on, hey, this is the experience of this Dark Lord and how she has affected this one particular town, Tepest as a whole has far more opportunities to it. Victal and the folk horror here is definitely a focus, but this is also a domain that, in a way that's quite different from sort of the fairy tale horror of Dementliu, plays up the creepy fae angle. There are dark woods, there are witches in them, there are creepy ancient fae. We know that in the hinterlands of Tepest, there's like several valleys that are each haunted by some different type of fae many of them are malicious, or many of them are your real story or your real sort of Grimm's fairy tale sort of like, kidnapping fae, the sort where it's like, oh, we don't go into the wilderness because the wilderness is active, alive, populated, and aggressively antagonistic toward us.
Right, which is a great way to set up going to that village too, right? Like you made your way through all these horrors, and then it's like, here, people are welcoming you.
Yes.
That you can finally get some respite, and then you're like, but wait, no, this is the actual real adventure. Is what's happening in this town.
Yeah, there might not be any walls preventing you from leaving, but this is better than going into the forest and maybe never being seen again.
Right. So you mentioned the fake connection a couple of times here. How does that figure into the cosmology, right? Like, is there a way that, like, if you're in the Feywild, you can go to this domain and vice versa?
Definitely. I mean, this is the sort of thing where with the thematic variety throughout the book and the way that the mists work and the way that the mists of Ravenloft can just sort of like creep into any part of the multiverse, you don't necessarily need to be like on an adventure on the material plane or like doing this spooky thing over here. I mean, you could be traveling the Feywild, you could be on an outer plane, you could be wherever, and the mists might have reason to scoop you up and bring you into a domain for a that's your experience now, or for a night or two horror adventure. And if you're playing a heavily Fey-inspired sort of campaign, and you'd like to do those sorts of stories with more of a horror twist, Tepest is a fantastic setting for that sort of vibe.
Excellent. Well, I love everything you're talking about here, except actually having to experience it. So
fair, valid.
Nice.
That makes a good Ravenloft DM.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. I will tell these stories for all of you, but I won't have to deal with, creepy villagers in an idyllic rural setting. That's not my jam. All right. So awesome. How can people, get excited about this coming out on May 18th and perhaps pepper you with more questions about it?
If you want to hunt me down online, Twitter is probably the easiest way. My name on there is F. Wes Schneider.
Excellent. Well, I am looking forward to all the stories that people will be able to tell using all the domains of dread and tools within Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and can't wait to hear more. So thanks a lot, Wes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.